So we are about a little under a month away from NFL free agency, so I thought it would be a good time to take a look at 10 of the top free agents and take a look where their best fit would be, not only for on the field, but also from a financial standpoint. I did go through each team and look at how much salary cap they have available, so right off the bat, only 21 teams have money to spend in free agency. The rest are way over the cap, so they're not even going to be discussed in this video. So let's go through player by player and talk about some potential teams. And make sure you let me know in the comments where you'd like to see these guys end up. Starting things off with a three-time Super Bowl champion, we have Chris Jones, who's probably the biggest name of the free agency class. So the Chiefs have a pretty big decision to make this offseason because not only is Chris Jones a free agent, but also their star cornerback, L'Jarius Sneed, is also a free agent. So they have about $24 million in cap space. You're not going to be able to afford to bring back both those guys. So I think they're ultimately going to have to make a decision. Do we want to keep Chris Jones or do we want to keep L'Jarius Sneed? And even beyond that, even if you're looking at like the receiver position, which we know has been one of their biggest, weakest spots of the entire year, somehow they won the Super Bowl despite not really having a number one receiver. I mean, I like Rashee Rice, but he was a rookie this year. If you wanted to go out there in the wide receiver market, there are guys, there are names available like Mike Evans, like Michael Pittman Jr., like a T. Higgins. But I just don't think they're going to be prioritizing that. They're going to be looking to keep one of these key guys, and ultimately that's when it's going to come down to. Do they want to keep Sneed or Jones? If they decide not to keep him, a couple spots that I highlighted here, the Bengals have $59.4 million in cap. They're probably going to use a lot of that to bring T. Higgins back. But they'd also have a sizable amount to go out there and land a big defensive name like Chris Jones. Also, Houston, you're probably going to hear me bring up the Texans a lot in this video because they're a great team with a lot of cap room. They have about $57.3 million. And they don't need to bring any of their guys back. They're all young. They're all kids. So they can afford to go out there and take a risk with a big veteran free agent. And another one I put down was Detroit, who's kind of in a similar spot with Houston. They're not paying a lot of guys, and they're obviously in contention. They were just in the NFC Championship, so they could definitely be a team to watch to throw around big money. Next up, we have Kirk Cousins, and I think the Vikings are in a similar spot with the Chiefs in that they have big-name free agents, but they don't have much cap room. You know, they have about $24.6 million in cap space, so they're another team that has to make a big decision in free agency, because not only is Kirk Cousins a free agent, but also Danielle Hunter, their best defensive player, is a free agent. We know their defensive line has already been an issue. Losing him would make it even drastically worse. So the Vikings, I don't envy the situation they're in right now. They're probably going to bring back Kirk Cousins. You know, if you ask me to put money on where Kirk Cousins is going to be next year, I think he's going to end up back in Minnesota, but it's not a guarantee. You know, they could look at the draft. I've seen guys like J.J. McCarthy or Bo Nix linked there. I don't know how realistic that is, but Kirk Cousins, before he got injured, was having by far and away the best year of his career. I think he's a perfect fit with Kevin O'Connell. They've got a great collection of receivers, especially between Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. So if I'm Kirk, I definitely want to stay. And guys, Kirk Cousins has made a lot of money over his career. So I think he would honestly be willing to take a little less, maybe to stay there, just stay in the familiarity with the Vikings. If he's not going to return to the Vikings, I did put down two other teams. Atlanta, they need a quarterback, and they got a good amount of cap space as well. They have about $25.8 million. And also the Raiders. The Raiders need a quarterback as well, and they have $36 million in cap. So those are a couple teams maybe, but if I had to bet, I think he's going to end up back in Minnesota. Next up is T. Higgins, and I kind of debated even putting him in this video because I think it's a 90% chance he's going to end up back with the Bengals. I've already seen reports of him potentially being tagged. If I'm the Bengals, there's no effing way I'm letting this guy go. No way. This guy could be a number one receiver on basically, two-thirds of the NFL. He's that talented. To pair that with Jamar and Joe Burrow, you just can't let him go. You have the cap room, sign him up long-term. If he doesn't go there, again, another team, I think basically every team with the money to sign him would be interested because he's that talented. But one I did highlight is the Chiefs. Like we talked about, they are definitely a team in desperate need of that true number one receiver. If they just want to completely forego their defense and let go of Sneed and Jones, they could have the money to bring in T. Higgins. But like I said, I don't think that's going to happen. I think that's kind of in a fantasy world. I'm very, very confident he's going to end up back in Cincinnati. Next up is Brian Burns. So if you saw my video a couple days ago, I was talking about stars I wanted to see on a new team. We definitely talked about this guy. I think he's definitely leaving Carolina. At least I hope he is, because I want to see him in a winning environment. But like I said in that video, as for a team he could go to, I think any team that would have the money to afford this guy is going to want him. I mean, the role he provides to a team is extremely valuable, and I wouldn't be surprised if a bidding war happened over Brian Burns, just for the skill set he provides, a young, charismatic defensive leader who's also a sack machine. So I think he is honestly one of the most lucrative free agents. He's also 26, so you're also pretty much going to be getting the prime of his career. So like I said, like any team that can afford him is going to want him. I put down Houston, put down the Bears. This to me feels like a Bears signing. I would not be surprised if he ended up being a Chicago Bear. Also Washington, who has by far the most cap space. They have $73.6 million, so they can throw a big bag of money to Brian Burns. It's really up to him. He's basically going to be able to pick wherever he wants to go. So we just talked about Chris Jones not long ago and about the Chiefs and their dilemma that they have with the money. Well, here we are with L'Jarius Sneed. Again, this just comes down to what are the Chiefs going to do? Like, I can see the arguments from both sides. Like, we should keep Chris. He's been the rock. He's been the heart and soul, the foundation of our defense throughout the dynasty. But the other side of that argument is he's 29. If you're going to be giving him like a 4 to 5 year contract, the last couple years of that deal are going to be brutal if you sign Chris Jones to that. And L'Jarius Sneed plays obviously a very important position. I mean, they both do, but corner at the age of 27. If I'm the Chiefs, I would bring Sneed back. I would let Jones walk as much as it would hurt. Chris Jones has been a massive, vital piece of the dynasty, so it's going to suck to see him have to leave. But just given the circumstance, like, these are the tough decisions you have to make. This is why Belichick was so good. He was able to move off. He didn't get attached to players. He moved off them. I think it's time for Chris Jones to go, and I would use that money to pay L'Jarius Sneed. He's one of the premier cornerbacks in the NFL. If they decide to keep Jones and Sneed has to find a new home, I put down two teams that would make a ton of sense. The first one would be Detroit. They spent a lot of money last offseason trying to upgrade their secondary, and it didn't really work out. You know, the names sounded appealing. Cam Sutton, C.J. Gardner-Johnson, who was hurt a lot of the year. But if they went out there and tried it again, I think this would be a massive home run hit, because I genuinely believe this is a top 5 cornerback in the NFL. And the other team would be Philly. They're in kind of a weird situation, but they do have about a little over $20 million in cap space. And they, of course, need desperate help at the cornerback position. So if he's not a Chief, I think that's 2 good landing spots for him. Next up, we have Jaylen Johnson. And this one hurts me because he was about a minute away from becoming a Pittsburgh Steeler at the trade deadline. I don't know what the hell happened, but the trade fell through and he stayed with the Bears. And we have no money to get him now. I think he's going to stay with the Bears, honestly. They have $46.8 million in cap room. And obviously, being a defensive culture, this is a team that is going to prioritize their defense. No matter if they draft a quarterback, they're going to spend their money on defense. That's the history of the Chicago Bears. And I would prioritize bringing him back, because not only is he an elite corner, he's also really young at 24. If you're the Bears, it makes no sense to let go of this guy for how young he is and how good he is. And I just don't see you getting really this level of talent anywhere else. If he's not going to end up back with the Bears, I think there's a couple interesting spots. Like we just said with L'Jarius Sneed, I think the Eagles and the Lions would be top destinations for really any secondary players. I think both those teams would be really excited to have him, especially the Lions, to steal him from in division. They'd be really happy to have him. But I think he will stay with the Bears. Next up is Antoine Winfield Jr. Tampa's in a very interesting spot because they're going to pay Baker Mayfield. I think that's pretty much a done deal. It just comes down to how much money are they going to give Baker Mayfield, because they have about $36.8 million in cap space. So you would think that might be enough to get Baker and Winfield, but if they give Baker like 25 or maybe even more than that a year, they're not going to be able to bring him back. So it really comes down to how much of that money is going to Baker. I would love to keep him as the Bucs. He's a perennial Pro Bowl guy at the safety position. If it's not able to work out, I think Philly would make a lot of sense. They need a lot of help in that secondary, specifically at safety. Putting him alongside Kevin Byard would really shore up that defense. And he's 25. I think he is one of the more lucrative players. And next up, we have Danielle Hunter, one of the premier pass rushers in the NFL, coming off of a monstrous 16.5 sack season. So I think he's going to get a shit ton of money no matter where he goes. He's extremely valuable. He's in that Chris Jones mold in terms of value, to me at least. And I don't think he's going to end up back with the Vikings because like we talked about with Kirk Cousins, they only have about $24 million in cap space. You can't bring back Kirk Cousins and Danielle Hunter. There's an outside chance they move off Kirk, bring Danielle Hunter back, get a rookie quarterback. I think that's very unlikely. I think they're going to bring Kirk back. So that means Danielle Hunter would be looking for a new team. I think the Bengals make a lot of sense, as we talked about earlier. They have a ton of cap space. They have $59.4 million. Now, obviously, you're going to pay T. Higgins. You're going to want to pay Jamar Chase down the line. But taking a big gamble on a guy this productive at a key position makes a lot of sense, especially like you look a couple years ago. The Bills did this with Von Miller. They knew giving him that big of a deal probably was going to backfire. However, they were willing to do it because they were in full-blown Super Bowl contention mode. It did end up not working because Von Miller got hurt. But the Bengals next year, this is probably the last time they're going to have any cap space money to throw around to premier free agents. So I wouldn't be surprised if they went out there looking for a guy like a Chris Jones or a Danielle Hunter. And another team I said as a dark horse would be the Colts. They have a ton of money as well with $58.9 million. And I think they're going to be a feisty team looking for a playoff spot. They moved off Shaquille Leonard. So if you want to get another premier defensive guy to put with Buckner, it would make a lot of sense as well. Next up is Patrick Queen. So we talked about the Ravens after they lost to the Chiefs. I felt like this was their best year to get the Super Bowl done because I don't think they're ever going to have as talented a roster as they did this season because they only have about $7 million in cap. So they're probably going to move some money around. You definitely have to probably move off OBJ. You probably have to move off Jadeveon Clowney. Eventually, you're going to have to move off of a Mark Andrews. Because Lamar is obviously being paid. You already paid Roquan. You're probably going to pay Kyle Hamilton. You're probably going to pay Zay Flowers. So it's like, where does Patrick Queen fit into all this? Like, do you really want to be paying premier money to two linebackers, in him and Roquan? My guess would say they will, just because he's their homegrown guy. And they're obviously one of the franchises that prioritizes linebackers with the history, obviously with Ray Lewis. So I think he will end up back in Baltimore. I would be kind of surprised if he ended up on other teams. But it does put the Ravens in kind of a weird situation going forward because they're going to be kind of committed to a handful of guys, and they're not going to be able to afford some of those more luxury players like they were this year. That's why I was so critical on them after they lost that game, because they're never going to have as talented a roster as they did this season. And our last player for today's video is Chase Young. He's not going back to the 49ers. They're way over the cap. There's literally no financial possible way that he can go back to the Niners. So we all kind of knew that this was a one-year rental whenever they traded for him anyways. As for where he can end up, there's a reason why I put him last, because I honestly don't know what his market is. Like, he was awesome in the Super Bowl, but in terms of the amount of money he's going to be making, I have no clue, because as a rookie, I thought he was destined to become a top 10 player in the NFL. I think that was kind of the conventional wisdom, because he had one of the most awesome rookie seasons I've ever seen. One defensive rookie of the year, willed the Commanders or the football team, whatever the hell they were called back then, into the playoffs as a 7-win team. They actually gave Tampa a good fight, if you remember. But obviously the injury, he hasn't been the same since the injury. He's still good, but he's not that generational level talent that I thought he was before the injury. There's a ton of teams out there that could throw money at him. But again, in terms of the amount he's going to be paid, I have no clue. Like, if he signed a deal for $8 million a year, I wouldn't be shocked. If he signed a deal for $18 million a year, I could kind of see that, because he was awesome for the Niners in the Super Bowl. You could still talk yourself into saying, well, he had that potential in his rookie year. We could still maybe get some of that. So, any team with money could be interested in Chase Young. It's kind of a gamble on what do you think he's going to be going forward. So definitely let me know where you think Chase Young can end up. Definitely let me know where you think any of these guys are going to end up in the comments. If you made it this far, appreciate you watching. Please like and subscribe.